Huh? Okay. Sorry? Tá 16-25, the question is defeated. Is the order of business agreed? The question is that the order of business be agreed to. Those in favour say tá.
Tá.
Those against say nil. The question is carried. Next item, tributes.
Will you announce that CPP is being deferred to the stop?
For members of the CPP, it's adjourned. The CPP is adjourned at 2 p.m. Ask her what she had a few words done from me on Jimmy Mulroy.
Yeah, you don't start the other way.
No.
6:35.
Tributes to former Senator Jimmy Mulroy. Call on Senator Cummins.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I'm privileged as Leader of the House to lead the tributes today to the late Jimmy Mulroy, former Senator, Councillor and Mayor of Drogheda, who sadly passed away in February of last year. I'd like to express my sincere sympathy to the family of the late Senator Mulroy, to his wife Chris, his children Caoimhe, Cormac and Christine, his brother and sister and grandchildren, and also his wider family. And it's a pleasure to have his family here with us in the chamber today. Jimmy served as a member of this House from 1987 to 1989 and was also a councillor for many years and Mayor of Drogheda. Jimmy was a committed public representative who served his constituents in an exemplary manner and indeed a dignified manner at all times. He was also very prominent in the business and sporting life of County Louth. Jimmy's door was never closed and he always made himself available to those who needed him, be it for political, business or indeed sporting advice. This was a trait that gained him widespread respect and admiration from many, irrespective of party politics. Jimmy held a policy that political opponents never became political enemies. That, along with his decency and warm and friendly personality, was something which was echoed in many tributes paid to him following his death last year. As a sportsman, businessman, politician and family man, Jimmy certainly lived life to the full, and I have no doubt that he is very much missed by all who knew him. Finally, I'd like to express my sympathies and that of this House to Chris and Jimmy's family, his friends, and indeed to all his Fianna Fáil colleagues in this House and beyond.
Senator Mooney.
And may I also extend Fianna Fáilte to the Mulroy family, and on behalf of the Fianna Fáil party, both nationally and locally, once again express our deepest sympathy on the sad loss. The Mulroy family would have sat through most of the earlier proceedings where tributes were being paid to the late Nicky McFadden, and throughout it all there was a common theme that Nicky McFadden was a lady, was somebody who had no enemies. Well, the male counterpoint of that in another era was Jimmy Mulroy. I had the pleasure and honour of serving with Jimmy. In fact, I think myself and Senator Norris were the only two members of the current House that actually served with Jimmy during his period of office, which ran from the 25th of April 1987, I remember well, to the 5th of July 1989. It's astonishing when you look at the life once led and the life once lived to find that in Jimmy's case that he covered so many areas of activity. He spent 30 years in Fianna Fáil, contesting local and county elections for the first time in 1985 and then general elections. But for some, and I'm quoting here, and I'm very grateful to Hubert Murphy, who wrote in the Drogheda Independent a very fitting tribute. I'd like to put that on the record. He said that for some the enduring memory was 1989. In fact, I was very much aware of that because we would all have been watching what was happening to our colleagues across the country in that particular general election. And I think it's fitting that I should put this on the record. The Dundalk Town Hall was packed to capacity as Jimmy and Dermot Ahern battled for the fourth and last seat behind Michael Bell, Brendan McGahan and Seamus Kirk. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my friend and our colleague Seamus, who's here in the public gallery. He will remember this vividly. They had battled 2 years previously when the Dundalk man edged it with Dermot. In fact, I was looking at the actual figures that were there. Jimmy actually increased his vote from 1987 to 1989, so obviously his time spent in the Senate was very fruitful for him in a constituency context. All the way through the counts it seemed Jimmy was in, but cruelly Brendan McGahan's surplus gave Ahern 5 more than him. It's the most amazing thing that happens in politics. I'm sure that the political pundits at the time, when they were analysing the transfers at that stage, were probably saying, well, Jimmy had it because there was no way that McGahan was going to give Dermot Ahern anything because they were on opposite sides. But it doesn't work like that, as we all know, particularly when it comes to third and fourth and fifth preferences. An awful lot of other factors come into play. The sad reality was that all the way through the counts, as I say, Jimmy was deemed in, but Dermot Ahern got 5 more votes than Jimmy. And Jimmy, despite a recount, it didn't change the result. What a cruel way for him, having ran in this 87 election, having had the comfort, I suppose, or the somewhat small reward of being here in this House for a couple of years. I'm sure he went into that 89 election with great confidence, and rightly so. And to find then, cruelly, that the transfer system, the PR system, was to beat him in the end. Nothing at all to do with Jimmy, nothing to do with Jimmy's capacity, his ability, or anything else. Just the cruel nature of the PR system, the way that it worked against him on that occasion. Jimmy, who was, as I say, nominated to the Senate at that time, in fact, he was nominated along with other distinguished members. They were all distinguished members, but I think it's important to just refer to the fact that he also came in at the same time as the late Eamon de Buitléar, who is a nationally known figure, and George Ogan, that some of you might not remember, but George Ogan, who still visits this House, was very much a specialist in archaeology. He also was mayor of the town in 2001-2002, and for the second time, when the devastation of 9/11 in New York rocked the world, and would visit the city twice in the months after that, including St. Patrick's Day, bringing with him the prayers of the Boyneside. He became chairman of Louth County Council in 2007, for the first time in his 22 years with the body, the first Drogheda man to hold the honour since Frank Godfrey, who's still currently serving, a great friend of all of us, in 1995-1996. And I'm sure that the Mulroy family felt a great deal of pride over Jimmy being elected as chair, because I know in my own family, where my father had served for a similar amount of time on Leitrim County Council without ever serving as chairman, and he managed to also have 1 year as chair, and he talked proudly about that period, and I'm sure the same was true of Jimmy and the Mulroy family. He formed his own company, M&L Manufacturing Limited, in 1974, providing switchgear to the construction industry. Was deeply involved in many aspects of Drogheda life, chairman of the Board of Management at DIFE and the VEC at one stage, and he retired from his various roles in 2009. He once said, in politics and sporting life, I never made any enemies. But really, I suppose, for an awful lot of people in Drogheda and people in County Louth and indeed the wider GAA family, it was his involvement in the GAA that most people will remember Jimmy. As a footballer with his beloved Newtown Blues and Louth, he enjoyed exceptional success, achieving an incredible 9 Louth Senior Football Championship medals with his beloved Newfoundland outfit. I'm not sure whether Seamus ever played against him at any stage during his own time, but I'd say that he would have found Jimmy a very tough but fair opponent. In 1963, Jimmy did something not too many Louth captains have achieved, lifting a cup. In this instance, the Winter League, the O'Byrne Cup, when the Blues made up almost half of the county side. He wore the red of the county seniors for the first time as a 19-year-old in 1959, exceptionally talented young footballer, and lined out until 1971, filling slots from midfield to full-back. He got Leinster honours as well, playing against Ulster in the Railway Cup final of 1964. When his footballing days ended, he went into management. The new role of team manager had been created in Louth, and Jimmy was asked to take it at the young age of just 32. He did it for 3 seasons. I'd like to just finish this brief tribute to my good friend and colleague Jimmy, who was married to Chris for 41 years and who remained devoted to each other until the end. As a final tribute, and I'd like to put this on the record, and I'm sure that the Mulroy family would like it to be on the record of this House. As a final tribute, Jimmy's son Cormac, at the funeral service, quoted the words of a poem by Kipling. "If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son." Once again, I'd like to express my deepest sympathy to Chris, Caoimhe, Christine and Cormac, grandchildren Evan and Tess, his brother Dermot, sister Helen, and many other family and friends, and a wide circle of friends, not least in this House.
Senator Morton.
Thank you. I too would like to express my deepest sympathy to the Mulroy family on the loss of Jimmy. As a fellow Louth person, and I'd also like to welcome Deputy Kirk to the House today for these tributes. I didn't have the good fortune to personally know Jimmy Mulroy, but his name and his reputation is something that I think anybody who was from County Louth would have grown up with. I think it's amazing, as in the lovely tribute there that Senator Mooney has made. I think it kind of highlights kind of the exact world of politics and how 1 minute you can be in and the next minute you can go from. As somebody said, you know, you can and maybe a different path that his life would have taken, or a different way. But I think the thing that comes out when you read all of the tributes is that wherever Jimmy Mulroy went, he was most deeply respected, not just by the people in his native Drogheda, but also by people in Dundalk and County Louth. And we all know sometimes the friendly animosity that goes on between people in Louth, in Dundalk and Drogheda. But I think that everybody is unanimous throughout the whole county on the height of respect that Jimmy had within the county. And again, I think, as being looking at some of the tributes when I read them, that in one of the tributes, one councillor said that he had always made sure that political opponents never became his personal enemies. And I think that is the sign of a true gentleman, the sign of a man who knows his own mind, knows it, and doesn't let political life or ambition or anything else take over. He was one of the most respected people in Drogheda and played a leading role in business, politics and sport within the community. He made an immense contribution to Drogheda and indeed to County Louth, bringing his business from Dublin down to Drogheda, I believe, to provide employment for people within the Drogheda area. And he dedicated his life to improve the lives of people, both locally and nationally. I've seen it referred also that, you know, people commenting that he was a true champion of the people. I think that's a lovely tribute to anybody who has, you know, if that could be said about us all, I think that's, you know, the mark of the man. In that, to call him the true champion of the people. But again, I think it was in his sporting life, again, playing with Newtown Blues. And again, it's the GAA craze for GAA in County Louth, which perhaps has not been so successful. But, you know, he certainly was very successful with the Newtown Blues.
Really?
Pardon?
I said, coming from Leitrim, I know the...
Yeah. Our day will come. But playing for Newtown Blues. And again... well, I didn't say that. Playing for Louth from 1959 to 71. So he was at the young age of 19. That's some achievement, you know, to get to play for your county team from 59 right up to 71. Elected to Drogheda Corporation and to Louth County Council in 1995. And of course, then, as Senator Mooney pointed out, the battles that he had within the general election then in 1989, and the sad way, very disappointing way. But I think, again, it's the mark of the person that had said he was a very fair person and he didn't hold any animosity towards people, whether it be political opponents or sporting opponents. And I think that's, you know, that's brilliant. It's lovely to see his family here today, and I'm sorry that I have my back to you. It's lovely to see his wife, Chris, his sister, Helen, who I just met there this morning, his brother, Dermot, his daughters, Kiva and Christine, and Cormac, his son, and of course the lovely Tess that's there, and Evan, her brother. So I think it's a lovely tribute to the Mulroy family that we do have the opportunity here today to express our sympathy. And on behalf of myself, County Louth, and the members of the Labour Party, we'd like to express our sympathies again. Thank you.
Senator Norris.
Thank you very much, Ciarán. Well, it's a sad privilege for me, on behalf of the Independents, to pay tribute to the late Jimmy Mulroy, and I'd like to also join with my colleagues in extending a warm welcome to his wife, his sister, children and grandchildren. And I've had the pleasure of speaking with them in the anteroom. I didn't know actually who they were. And then I realized I went over and talked to them. And I have to say this, the spirit of Jimmy Mulroy is still around as long as that family is there, because they have it. He was a thoroughly decent man. And that's the first thing I want to say. He was a thoroughly decent and honourable man. And that is, I think, an important thing to note, to strike at a time when so many of our institutions, political, cultural and religious, are in question. We need decent people in politics. And Jimmy was a thoroughly decent man, wonderfully affable, enjoyed a joke. I mean, he would have, I think, probably rather enjoyed the Our Day Will Come and the Chucky Our Law, which we'll probably hear from Trevor Cloherty, because he loved to laugh, and his family reminded me of a bit of banter we had across the floor about the relationship between W.B. Yeats and Maud Gonne. And whether or not, had they married, whether the children would inherit the looks of one and the brains of the other, what combination would be appropriate. And I do remember that, and it was very funny, and that was the enjoyable part. And he was somebody who was able to show that you could enjoy a joke. Life could be fun, even when it was being serious, because there was also no more serious person. And he contributed so wonderfully in business, in sport, and in politics. And that is a very considerable range in which to contribute to your country. I always thought of him really as an entrepreneur because he was always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, onto ideas, and always in motion. And that's why I think, and I hope it's not inappropriate to say this, there is another connection between the late Senator and then TD Nicky McFadden, who is also a much-loved member of this House. Parallel was drawn between her and Jimmy. Both of them were attacked by very insidious illnesses. And it just shows, people think that politicians are in some way immune to the frailty of humanity. And they're not. But I can't think of anything more cruel than Alzheimer's for Jimmy, because he was so alert, because he was always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And to think of him being confused is a sad thought. But he had a wonderful family to cherish and comfort him in this situation. We exchanged Christmas cards up until the time of his death, I think. He was one of the people I kept in contact with a little bit. And a couple of years ago, can't be more than, well, of course, I'm pretty old. I did enter, as Pascal said, at the same time as Jimmy. It just seems like yesterday, but it's the best part of 30 years ago now. But I met him some years ago in the car park, and he hadn't changed. He was exactly the same. And I'm glad that that is my memory of him. And he also, of course, I think he must have been very proud of having been Mayor of Drogheda. I'm sure that was one of the achievements that he really appreciated. Politics is a tough game. To lose by 4 or 5 votes is really awful. But at the same time, he picked himself up, went on with his life, and that, I think, was, again, a tribute to him. And so it's pleasant and gratifying to see his family here in the company of his fellow Louthman, Deputy Seamus Kirk. So he will be missed by none more than his family, and I'm sure there is genuine mixed emotions. There must be pride to hear his colleagues speak of him in this fashion. There must also be sadness that he has left us. But that is the fate of all of us.
Clarity.
Gurmil mad Harley, agus achnad lem cholaki her fad, while I'm fearing fault a clan Jimmy Mulroy and Chanya agus ta isúder roads go greer or Lawrence and Jack in your year. I'd like to welcome the family of Jimmy Mulroy. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Jimmy, obviously. Being a younger member of the House here, I'm only here a couple of years, but it is important to hear the tributes that are being made, and I think you know, it's a testament to the man, the pictures that are being drawn here today by the different speakers. And I think it's a very important thing that we do here is recognise in the Seanad, and I commend the leader on this, that we do take time out from what is a very hectic schedule and what is very important matters, that this also is given the due reverence and the due importance to recognise the work that has been done by former members, particularly on their passing. So on behalf of the Sinn Féin group here, I would like to convey our sincerest Covrón O'Chree in Arida was Jimmy, and I think sitting listening to the tributes, I think what we need to remember is that politics is a family game, really. I think people in the general public tend to see the public figure who's out there front and centre a lot of the time, making the speeches, going to the meetings, etc. But I think we all know how much of a support network are behind all of us as politicians, and without that we would be nothing. So I think it is very important to recognise the role that you obviously played in supporting Jimmy in doing all of his public work. And it's quite obvious from the testimony that's been given here today that he was a very honourable, decent man who did great work for his community, for the people of Drogheda, was a great man on the sports field and on the field here. It's obviously, it reminds us as well as members that it is a privilege to serve on behalf of the people we represent. And we should never forget that, and we should never forget the support structures we have behind us as well. And the only Tuki law we need to think of today is that our day, well, all our days will come. And sometimes we can get very heated here in the political battle across the floor and in the political issues, but we all need to remember that there is a humanity behind all of what we are doing, and we need to remember that, particularly on days like that. So, har Mian Hain agus har Cian, bwyl hin féin seo sa Seanad agus sa teach go bhhailm ar Covrón O'Chree a chur inúldaí agus buchas blach libes an deis seo labhairt faoi Jimmy agus a gceist déag anam agus anmach an amar bheith fad.
Senator Brennan.
Gur mai go de caithlig agus ba bhhail amsa freisin ar dús fáte the chur of Mulroy, the G and Sean and Johan. Unlike any of my colleagues, my first, I won't say confrontation, but my first meeting with Jimmy Mulroy was on the GA football fields of Louth. And indeed some of my lasting memories will be of Jimmy on the football field. That's where I first met him. And as a footballer and player myself, I'd have to acknowledge as far as I'm concerned, there was no need for red cards or yellow cards or black cards or warning signs for Jimmy Mulroy a Catholic. He never ever had his name taken on a football field for doing anything wrong. And that is true, and I defy anybody to beat those statistics. Somebody said he made his senior championship debut in 1959 at 19 years old. He was a member of one of the greatest club teams that this country ever produced, Newtown Blues from Drogheda. Unfortunately, I'd have a few more senior medals than two if the Blues weren't there in the 60s and 70s. But that be it as it may, I have some great memories. Somebody mentioned 9 senior championship medals. Takes some doing for any man to have 9 senior champions, the best football team in your county. Made his debut for Louth as a 19-year-old. Played for his county for a number of years, as has been already stated. Played for Leinster. I'm not sure whether he captained Leinster or not, but he captained Louth. He joined the Louth County Council the same year as I did myself, 1985. I'd have to say, and one of my greatest memories, and in fairness to Jimmy, everybody I met over the years with him, he'd recall the incident where Brennan scored 3 goals on him in a league final in Seamus Kirk's home village of Knockbridge, and I'm glad to see Seamus, another, if I might call, another gentleman in politics, as was Jimmy Mulroy. But if he said it to me once, I'm not quite Chris, to 300 different people, and to people again and again, do you know what this fella did on me one day? You know, but anyway, no, somebody said he never had an enemy, and he never had an enemy. He played the game within the rules. He was so astute, and his anticipation and the reading of a game. He was an exemplary sportsman, man. And I'd love to see young men, and indeed young women, emulating what Jimmy Mulroy did on the football fields of this country. As I say, we joined the council together in 1985. I was only 16 years of age then. Jimmy was a few years older than me. We'll forget about that. He chaired the Louth County Council. He chaired the Louth County Council. He waited 22 years to become chairman. I waited 20 years myself to become chairman, but I can remember vividly the 1989 election, and Jimmy being beaten by 5 votes. One family didn't turn out. But that's what it was. I think there was a recount as well. And I wouldn't like it to go on the record, but I'd feel that Brendan McGahan wished that it went the other way on that occasion, like I did myself, quite honestly. But probably, he was a gentleman and a true Drogheda man. Made a significant contribution to the business world of County Louth. You know, there wasn't many people, many businesses had such a successful business. And I have to say, in his latter years, for a man that was so agile and so fit, and it was sad to see him suffer. Well, he was well looked after, and I have to congratulate you and your family, brother and sister, and all your family, how well he was looked after. But I have great memories of him. I didn't serve in the Seanad with him. I have heard of his contribution to the Seanad, and I would just extend my sympathies to Chris, to Kiva, Cormac, Christine, his sister Helen, and his brother Dermot, and all his immediate friends and colleagues in Fianna Fáil. I mean that he was popular all over the house, and my experience of him on Louth County Council, he made a significant contribution. Yes, Jay, Garo.
Senator Byrne.
Agus a caiirí agus bhfuil sa freisin mo cóhrón a chur the clown on ear Hanador Jimmy Mulroy agus tá ásorm go mit tugtha go léir le chéile aniu chun cuioine cána dhéanamh ar an obair a rinne sé sa Seanad agus ar an obair a rinne sé ina héil I lig. I want to welcome the family and pay tribute to Jimmy Mulroy, both for his work in the Seanad and indeed for his entire life. Senator Pascal Mooney, who served with Jimmy, highlighted a number of the nominees that Jimmy was appointed to the Seanad with, but I think Pascal and
think he probably agrees with me. He vastly underplayed that, actually. The Taoiseach's nominees in 1987 were, in fact, one of the most distinguished group of politicians that were ever appointed to this Seanad, and I list them all. There was a minority of party appointees, and in fact, nearly all of them were business people, in fact, and it shows you the way Mr Haughey was thinking at the time. But Seamus Cullimore from Wexford was a Fianna Fáil senator. He was a businessman. Pascal mentioned and Seanad Éamon de Butler. He mentioned Professor George Ogan as one of the most famous archaeologists in the world. Brian Friel, the playwright, was appointed to the Seanad at that time. Tom McEllistrim from Fianna Fáil. John Magner, the racing man, was appointed as well. Jimmy Mulroy. Vivian O'Callaghan, the hotelier from Bantry, as a Fianna Fáil man. Dr. John O'Connell was appointed that year as well, who became Minister for Health. He only died recently as well. Nicholas O'Connor was a businessman from the Gaeltacht, Irish language connections, and Senator John Robb was appointed as well at the time. And he was one of the first people of, I suppose, a Protestant or Unionist background to sit in this House and to sort of emphasise the cross-border role. So you really have an exceptional group of people that were appointed by Mr Haughey to the Seanad in 1987. And I have to say, I think when you look at it like that, it was a tremendous honour for Jimmy to be included in that, because there were a minority of political appointments, and the political appointments, as I've said, by and large were business people, were employers, were entrepreneurs, and I suppose that was the mood at the time. When we came out of, at the time when Fianna Fáil came into power in 1987, the country was obviously in a huge crisis, and the objective was to reduce the debt. It's all like what's happening today, of course. And to get people back to work. And I certainly, as a 10-year-old at the time, remember very vividly the economic difficulties at the time that business people had. So I think you have the cultural side that Mr Haughey was very keen on, but the business side as well as the practical side are reflected in those Seanad nominations. And it really is an honour for Jimmy to have been, I think a huge honour for Jimmy to have been among that special group of 11 people who were appointed to the Seanad at the time. I'd like also to express the sympathy of my father and my family. And obviously that has been done before at the time of Jimmy's passing. But my father served for 15 years on Drogheda Corporation with Jimmy, and he was a very good colleague. And I think he was always talking about investment for Drogheda and bringing jobs to the town. And I have to say, I was just laughing at this earlier. I remember as a 10 or 12-year-old just the news being on, the Boyneside Radio or LMFM being on, and I very vividly remember Jimmy talking about natural gas for Drogheda, and I very vividly remember him talking about bringing factories or jobs to Drogheda. I mean, and that type of thing. And I think they were just two of the things at the time that were very important. He was a tremendous Gaelic footballer, and I suppose he is remembered, I suppose, locally for that. And I think Senator Brennan has very fairly and very eloquently set out Jimmy's record on that. I just want to conclude again by expressing sympathies and thanking the family from here, and Deputy Kirk and the Seanad leadership for organising this, and once again to express my sympathies to Chris and to Helen there and Quiva, Christina Cormac and the lovely grandchildren as well. I think it's great to be here, and I think it's wonderful that we remember this and that this is on the record of the Seanad. I suppose that may well be important for the family as well in time to come. They can look back on this debate, as well as all of Jimmy's own contributions, which remain forever on the record of the Seanad here.
Senator Darcy.
Goramai get the Kahirli August top road arm and you couple of focal off with Jimmy Mulroy, far more, Leach more, our son on Conte, August far Stuma, far Unrika. Bhí angrá aige dá chonte agus dá híor agus rinne sé a fíorhíhil a gcónaí ar san muintear drutha datha, muintear Contalú agus muintear na Héireann. Jimmy was an amazing man, full of integrity, full of goodwill towards others. A man who could work with all politicians of all parties and never said a cross word to anybody, but wanted the best for his county, well, his town first of all, his county and his country. he told me one day, while we were having a chat over coffee, he told me that he was that sorry for Cooley Kickham's and the Blues beating them every time that he let Terry Brennan score 3 goals and a point one day. And so that was wasn't he a very decent man to do that? He was a businessman, and he had a business ethic and a business culture, and everything had to be judged in terms of the benefit it had for the community or the county. I recall him at Louth County Council. He was a very successful chairman of Louth County Council. And I recall him week after week talking about a road called the Northern Cross Route. And there wasn't a meeting ever went past, but he talked about this road from the M1 to the port of Drogheda. And if it ever is completed, I hope that the people of Drogheda and County Louth have the wisdom and the decency to name that road after Jimmy Mulroy, because it will be because of him that it is on the agenda. But could I say that the best memory I have of Jimmy Mulroy is when we both went to New York in 2008 for St. Patrick's Day, and we were marching up Fifth Avenue. And that was a fantastic occasion, and Chris was with us. And this is it, you see, what I remember most. Chris would go out every day shopping, every day. And myself and Jimmy would sit in having a cup of coffee, and we used to have a bet with each other about how many bags Chris would bring back with him. Because he was devoted, absolutely devoted to you, Chris, 100%. And I am sure his loss is almost unbearable in that regard. And to yourself and your beautiful family. And I met Kiva at the Louth People of the Year Award, where she accompanied her dad 1 year. To you and your beautiful family, which a legacy above all he leaves. You have my deepest sympathy, but also my utmost respect. For my
Carol, I'd just like to join in the wonderful tributes, actually, and to Senator Jimmy Mulroy, indeed, led by the Leader of the House and our party representatives as well. And just a wonderful tribute to and well-deserved tribute to a wonderful public representative and indeed a member of this House. I just want to extend to his wife, beloved wife, Chris, of 41 years. Sons Cormac, daughter Kiva, and Christina, son-in-law John Comiskey, and grandchildren Evan and Tess, and his sister Helen. Indeed, to his very good friend, former Minister and former Cant Corrad Deputy Seamus Kirk, who worked with Jimmy over the years. I got to know Jimmy. I was in the Department of Health in '87, and he was a senator here. And I knew the concerns he had for hospital issues in County Louth. It was very much to the forefront of his work. To my memory, in this House, he was appointed by late Charles J. Haughey, and he certainly had great aspirations for him to be a member of this House, and indeed, hopefully, would have been a future minister. He has certainly had the ability to be a member of the Dáil and indeed a minister in the future, because I knew his work, his business involvement, and the fact that he was producing tremendous product, in fact, and the fact that he had employed people and gave employment and gave concerns to the whole question of creating jobs in the constituency and in County Louth. So a very proud tradition, and I know the family can be very proud that the former mayor of Drogheda and chairman of Louth County Council. He achieved an awful lot in the period. I must say I always found him to be the most gentlemanly persons. He made, when I came into the House on different issues, he always played and made a very major contribution. In fact, he was a very good attender in this House. The period he was actually a member here, he took it extremely serious, because the late Senator Jimmy Mulroy was someone who took his job seriously, whether it was in his business or mayor or being a husband, father and grandfather. So just think we're very proud to have known Jimmy Mulroy and wish his family our deepest sympathy on his loss, his early death, and just say God bless him, and I hope he rests in peace.
Thanks, Senator. I'd like to also be associated with the tributes to the late Jimmy Mulroy, and I'd like to welcome his wife Chris and family here today to the distinguished public gallery, along with Deputy Kirk and Minister O'Dowd, who was a former member of this House. I knew Jimmy Mulroy for many years, since he was elected to the County Council and to the Town Council in 1985, and we met on numerous occasions during Senate elections and here around the House in Leinster House. While I never served in the House here with him, I met him on many occasions, and he struck me as a man that carried his responsibilities with the greatest of ease. He was never in bad form. He never carried a chip on his shoulder. He was always in good form, and he was a model in that sense, because you meet so many people who carry chips on their shoulders, who talk about people behind their backs. But Jimmy Mulroy wasn't any of that at all. And when you look at his career, he had a very satisfying career, both as a politician and as a footballer and as a manager. He was a town councillor, he was a county councillor, he was a senator. He ran for the Dáil on a number of occasions and was just short of the post on both occasions, and very unlucky not to have been elected to Dáil Éireann. He was Mayor of Drogheda and he was Chairman of Louth County Council, and those are great honours to bestow it upon anybody. Any one of them is a great honour, but to have done all of those is certainly a great honour. He was a club footballer, winning 9 county championships. It's an unbelievable feat, and I suppose if you go through the length and breadth of the country, there are very few people who would have 9 county championship medals. He played county football for a long number of years. He played club football for a long number of years. He was a club football manager, and he was a successful club football manager with a club, and he was a county football manager as well. So he carried all of those responsibilities with great ease, and he was a model man in my regard, in my view. He certainly never looked his age either. He always struck me as a man that looked about 50, even though that he was in his 60s. And but that's, I suppose, a sign of the way he carried his responsibilities. So it was a great honour to know Jimmy Mulroy, and he's a great loss to his wife Chris and to his family and to Fianna Fáil and to Louth as a whole. So I'd like to be associated with the very fine tributes that was paid here by the members of the House. So, yes, Jay, go row and concludes the statements on late Jimmy Mulroy. Number 45, motion 9 regarding the beef industry. Senator O'Donovan, or Senator Byrne, sorry. Senator Byrne is leading off on item number 45, motion 9 regarding the beef industry. I'd like to welcome Minister Coveney to the House. Senator Byrne.
I think this is a very, very important motion today, and I'm delighted that my colleagues have decided to put this forward. I think when you talk to anybody involved with beef at the moment, there's just a depression among the farmers at the moment, and I think that's the best way to describe it. The collapse in prices is pushing many of the people over the edge financially, and farmers are struggling, and anyone involved in that sector at that level is struggling. And I talk to people, and you just know by the humour that farmers are in. They're just in bad form. Any of them that are connected to beef, any of the ones that I'm meeting and that I know are people that deal with cattle, and they're coming to my clinic on social welfare issues relating to the collapse in beef prices, and that's something that I've noticed over the last period of time. And it is very, very sad to see farmers in that type of humour, because really we're hearing so much about how the agricultural sector is going to bring us out of the depths of recession, and when you actually see the reality on the ground and you see that bad humour that has really become noticeable, and I have to say it's really touched me over the last while. There are two major issues which have led to the current crisis, and I think the Minister has to deal with this crisis and has to get a grip on it and not just rely on the usual, I suppose, platitudes of the market, because we don't have, the agricultural sector shouldn't be treated the same way as any other product market. Beef processors have changed the game, altering age and weight criteria of bulls to be slaughtered, resulting in the collapse of the price of beef. Also, in relation to the UK market, there are difficulties in relation to labelling and communications and the marketing of Irish and British beef, and that has resulted in a drop of demand. And these issues are directly placing a huge pressure on farm incomes and threaten exports from this country and employment in the sector. We've seen the CSO figures where we've all these new jobs, and I think half of them are supposed to have come from agriculture, but they're certainly not coming in this sector. Our view is that the government has been extremely slow to recognise the gravity of the situation, and they've done very, very little to deal with it. What we are proposing is the establishment of an independent regulator with real decision-making powers to oversee this industry in Ireland, and to remove some of the powers and the domination of the processors, and to enable family farms and old farmers to make a living producing beef in this country for export and for our own market. The labelling issue in the UK could be dealt with by the Minister and by the Government through increased cooperation with the Government of the UK and indeed the Executive in the North. But not very much has been done. This is an issue that is causing a huge crisis, and yet when the consumer goes to the supermarket, when the consumer goes to the restaurant, that collapse in prices is not evident at all. And in fact, the price of beef is almost becoming a luxury product in this country as well, because of the prices, and that is not the fault of the farmers. So over the last 12 months, as we know, and this is why we're here, there's been a collapse in bull beef prices, with factories altering the age and weight specifications required to slaughter cattle. Producers have been forced to accept losses of up to €200 to €300 a head. Processors are saying that adjusting the criteria in this manner is a response to the market. But the reality is that the domestic demand is limited for the Irish product, and we're heavily reliant on exports, and we are subject to those international fluctuations. In my view, there needs to be a competition authority investigation into the relationship between the beef processors in this country and the large retail multiples in the UK. I think it's about time that the government actually looked at this seriously and maybe referred the issue to the competition authority, or indeed to the European Commission, because of the cross-border and the export and the European dimension to the issue. That is where it has to happen, but sometimes departments and ministers, and I think all ministers can be guilty of this, that in the national interest that the big boys in any industry tend to get hurt the most, while the person at the bottom and the key person at the bottom of that chain is left out. It's imperative that the Minister listens to farmers and heeds the IFA's call for an emergency summit between all the stakeholders. We're advocating in our motion, and indeed as a matter of policy, for an impartial regulator with real decision-making powers to oversee the industry. That can be coupled with a competition authority or indeed European Commission investigation into the competition law aspects of this in terms of the relationship between the processors and the large multiples that control so much of the market. A sector of key national importance, and we see again the claims from the government are that half of all the jobs created are from agriculture. This cannot be continuously exposed and left unprotected. So the farmers can't be left unprotected and subject to these swings in demand, because they'll just stop. They can't keep sustaining these losses, and very quickly then this very, very important industry and this very important export industry will be a drag on the economy rather than something that we can actually look forward to as helping to build that economy. The processors must provide clear signals to the farmers that can allow them to plan ahead, because I mean obviously the fluctuations of the market, for a period of time you can be doing well, make investments, etc., that maybe need to be made, and make decisions based on doing that, and then all of a sudden, due to factors that are totally out of the control of the farmer, but that may possibly be within the control of the government and under the influence of the government, and certainly under the control of an independent regulator if it were there. Without them, the whole thing could collapse and the business model collapse, and therefore it contributes to the country not moving ahead as it should be. So the beef processors must be held to account by the government in providing a fair solution to all these people, all these farmers. Those farmers on the ground are key to all the targets that you're talking about in Brendan Smith's document that I'm glad you've adopted under Harvest 2020. It's the farmers that are there, and at the moment the mood is so bad. I mean, people are giving up. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, you really meet people, and I can think of 4 individuals straight away who are just, there's a sadness over them because of this situation, and there's a depression there because
farming now than we've seen for 20 years.
Yeah, well, I'm talking here about farmers that I've met and that I know and that are really suffering because of these issues here, and I think that type of a rebuttal on what is a very specific issue in relation to farming. It's not a general. I'm not making a general point about agriculture in general. I mean, we have the CSO statistics that you keep quoting, and we look to see them verify the 30,000 new jobs being created. But in the sector, there's a major crisis. I think by the Minister's intervention there shows that maybe it's not been taken as seriously as it should be. So we're looking for this motion to be adopted. I do want to thank the Minister for being here. I think it's very important that the Minister for Agriculture is here. And again, I want to thank my colleagues for raising this. And I hope that some action will come from this, and that people, the farmers in this part of the market, may get some encouragement, and that there may be action from the government in relation to this.
Thank you, Senator Byrne. Senator O'Donovan, to second the amendment, and you have
I second the amendment and would like to welcome ministers to the House. And as I outset, I suppose it's very easy to criticise ministers. Some things happen, I suppose, outside his control, but it's our duty as an opposition to highlight problems that face farmers or whatever. I suppose at the outset, to be positive toward the minister, I would like to acknowledge his work that he's been doing, trying to open up international markets, etc. And it's a pity to see that this work is impacting on particularly those who are trying to finish cattle, and particularly those in the bull beef market, where there seems to be an impasse at the moment and a poor price return. A key element of the Food Harvest 2020 plan was to increase beef killed from 30,000 per week to 40,000 per week, and that target isn't being met. I know it can't be met overnight, but at current rates, it looks like the kill is running between 31 and 32,000. The factories are telling farmers to push back the introduction of the cattle to them, and this is causing extra strain on the farmers. The factories saying, well, hold on for another 4 or 6 weeks. That's extra costs for the farmers.